Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Thank you so much for joining in. And a happy Sunday to those of you for whom it's still Sunday. I think in certain parts of the world, maybe it's Monday by now. What an interesting world we live in. So, my understanding of what Bruno Groening called us to is a new way of life. And very specifically to break from what he called the force of habit. That all of us, to some extent, hopefully less, now that we've been practicing this teaching, live our lives based on habit. And these habits, sadly, are not always the most healthy habits. And oftentimes, Bruno pointed out that these habits were passed down to us by people who thought they knew what was true, thought they knew what was helpful, and actually didn't. And so we find ourselves, I find myself every day, doing things automatically. Now that I've been on the spiritual path a little bit, and that now that I've really taken to heart some of Bruno's teachings, I've built in some good habits, meaning things happen automatically. Sometimes I make really good choices. For example, when I start to feel tired now, in the past, I would have gone on the computer or tried to distract myself. Now I just effortlessly, more often, just find myself sitting down and tuning in. Like, okay, time to recharge. Like, that's a helpful habit. We're not talking about breaking those. We're talking about breaking those habits. For example, in the old days, when I was tired, I would get on the computer because I didn't want to feel the tiredness. And obviously, that would sort of amp me up a little bit, but in the long run, I would feel worse. And so, one of the most important habits has to do with the habits of what thoughts we take in. Here's what Bruno Groening had to say about that. God has decreed so much for us, but humans don't take it into himself. Humans would rather plague himself, would rather work with evil, working day in, day out, even treating evil, instead of listening to God and really following God, allowing God to guide him, doing what God has determined for him. So here's an interesting question for each one of us to ask. How much of each day do we spend focused on that which is healthy, happy, and helpful? And how much of each day do we spend focus on problems, illness, burdens, both? Is there someone honking their horn in the background? Both our own, other people's, and problems of the world. It's a very interesting question. Before this teaching, I was, really before the spiritual path, I was very focused on what was not good. And right before I found Bruno Groening's teachings, I found the 12 steps, which in many ways are very similar. And it taught me to focus on what's good. And when I wasn't feeling good, to ask God or to ask someone else for help. It was amazing preparation for this, for what Bruno shared, what Bruno taught. So sometimes when, I don't know if this is something that Bruno Groening recommended, but I've read that, at some community hours, people were given the instructions just to think of something that makes them happy. I don't know if this is, I'm assuming this was something that Bruno suggested as a way to begin Einstellen, as a way to begin tuning in. And what an amazing idea to just think of something that makes us happy. Because again, most of the time throughout the day, these thoughts are just coming, and we don't just, or I didn't, now I do, but I didn't stop and pause and say, I want to draw a good thought to me. I want to draw a thought to me that makes me happy, that brings me joy. What an idea! Who knew we could do such things? And we can. And over time, that can become our new habit of really taking in thoughts that not only bring us happiness and joy, but lead us in the right direction. As Bruno said, we need to follow God. And what is God? The good, love, life, harmony. And how does all this begin? It begins with our thoughts. Well, actually, according to Bruno Groening, it begins with our will, our intention to, our will for the good, our desire for the good. That draws positive thoughts to us. That leads us to positive actions. So, let's think of something that brings us joy. A happy memory, a scene in nature, a smiling baby. And once we take in that thought and make contact with good feelings, if you haven't already, let's begin to observe our bodies, taking in the good, taking the good into ourselves. Noticing what you feel, intending to receive the good. Sometimes when my mind wanders, I like to be a little playful and say, you know, if I tune in long enough, God's going to give me $100 million. And that really gets my attention. So whatever works. And I like to joke around with myself. Who can fathom $100 million? What that would be like to just one day have a check arrive for $100 million. Can't even fathom, beyond my comprehension, what that life would be like. And of course, that's just a metaphor. Bruno once said something to the effect of that our life here on earth is supposed to be filled with wonderful experiences. So let's really take to heart Some people see life as a punishment. Bruno Groening presented life as a gift. And that it's natural to have positive, good, joyous experiences. Which, of course, that would mean God's will for us is happiness and joy and aliveness. We have this very strange habit as human beings of focusing on what doesn't feel good. It's like, imagine we have a cut on the side of our face, and it's like we poke at it and pick at it and do all these things that make it hurt worse. Or we've acquired the habit of focusing on what doesn't feel good. It's very strange when we step back and take a look at it. Now, of course, so in essence, what I'm talking about is breaking the suffering habit and learning the divine peace, joy habit. And that's, some people go too far with this, and I was certainly one of them, to the place where I become unbalanced, where it's like, don't even think at all or deal with or address any problems in my life. And of course, then problems pile up. So we want to be balanced. For example, if it feels like it's time to go see the doctor, Bruno advised people to go see the doctor. If we feel like we need advice on a situation, I find that if something's on my mind and all my different spiritual ideas and my different, praying about it and tuning in about it, if that doesn't resolve it, then I'll talk to a friend about it. We want to be balanced, because in instilling the joy habit, we can go too far and then um, not deal with life in a way that's actually unhealthy. I've experienced it. I've seen it in a lot of spiritual circles. We're learning how to not fixate on problems, but that doesn't mean we give them appropriate attention to address, you know, um, things that need to be addressed. The question is, what is life? Many people, and I used to be one of them, I saw life as a punishment. I looked forward to not having a body. I sometimes think of that as, pie in the sky theology, that life is a burden and things will be better when I'm dead. Well, if that's the case, then in essence, life is a punishment in that way of thinking. What a not fun way of thinking. Bruno Groening said, I'll paraphrase it. He said, the person who doesn't experience their life as a gift is a very shabby person. He said, I don't like to use that word. I'll see if I can find the exact quote. And I was certainly one of them. I was a shabby person. I did not feel grateful to be alive or to have a life. And, to anyone watching this video or anyone joining us live who doesn't feel that way, it's not to make anyone wrong. I still occasionally feel that way. But just to recognize that maybe there's another possibility. Maybe there's another way of looking at life. Maybe the way we're looking at life is just being guided by untrue, negative, painful thoughts. Bruno Groening spoke about rising above our problems. It's a very interesting, of course, we're in the process of freeing ourselves from all evil and hence the source of our problems. But what an interesting phrase, to rise above. Because sometimes there's this thing called regulation, and sometimes something doesn't heal immediately. And then we need to rise above it and still have faith, even amidst symptoms, even amidst problem. It hasn't been my experience on this path that everything just vanishes instantly. I've certainly had that happen. I've had healings where it was there 1 second and gone the next with almost no effort. And I had one healing that took over 4 years. I'm in the middle of a healing right now that, it's been working on it for 6 years. And so we need to have a higher perspective, or as Bruno said, to rise above. That's why one of my, I don't want to say, I have so many favorites. Something that Bruno said that I really appreciate is he said, the good will prevail. To really take that to heart, that no matter what we're going through, it will heal. May not heal tomorrow, may not heal next year. It may heal in the next second. But to hold that optimism is bigger than the problem. As Bruno said, God has decreed so much for us. call it spiritual optimism. Not knowing when, not knowing how, but really trusting that everything is all right and everything will be all right. And that's not to discount that life is painful and challenging sometimes. And we see that in Bruno Groening's life. And of course, Jesus' life and each of our own lives. And as I settle into trust that things will be okay, then when challenges present themselves, I'm not swept off my out of balance. I'm not swept out of the divine connection or out of trust as easily. And when I am swept out, which I'm not perfect yet, it happens at least once a day, if not many times, then I'm able to come back more quickly. Yeah. I'll see if I can find that. Jerry made a comment. I'll see if I can find. I don't have the German. Jerry is curious about this comment of Bruno's that a person who doesn't experience their life as a gift. The English translation is that person is a very shabby person. I'll come to that in one moment. Bruno said, yes, truth will break through. What a declaration. Truth will break through. The truth, that which is true and good. And then Bruno said, yes, truth will break through. And a human can only experience this through himself. It's not that an ideology will break through. It's what it is that as we tune in, we can actually experience it within ourselves. I'm not finding it right now, Jerry, so it'll come now or later. It's written that Jesus called his message the good news. That's what gospel means. It's a translation of that Jesus came to share good news. Well, what is that good news? Well, personally, I find it most clearly expressed in Bruno Groening's a few key points of Bruno Groening's teaching, such as the truth will break through or the good will prevail. Here's Bruno Groening's advice what to do when we're having trouble. He said, go to a friend who knows. And the friend will say, you don't have to tell me what the problem is. You can tell me tomorrow if you want to, but here, sit down. And then what Bruno said that this friend, a true friend, will tell you, he gave you new, healthy courage to face your life, and that he comforted you and spoke with a sincere heart and said, just trust. It will be okay. What you can't do, I will do for you. So for me, the good news is that the gospel, my understanding, and everyone's welcome to have their own, my understanding of the gospel, the good news, is that everything will be okay, and we have a friend, we have a helper who, if we trust in them, will help us through the parts that we can't navigate on our own. Again, Bruno said, go to a friend you trust, call on them, ask for them for help, and what they will tell you is just trust. It will be okay. What you can't do, I will do for you. So let's spend a little time and really take that to heart. See if what I'm saying resonates with you. See if Bruno's words resonate. Please don't believe me just because I say it. Just a guy on a computer. And Bruno Groening, who has much more qualifications than me to say, hey, this is true, believe it. He didn't say that. He invited people to find out for themselves. Our thoughts start dwelling on the negative, giving those thoughts away, thinking of something that brings us joy, or as Bruno said, asking for a good thought, asking God for a good thought, wanting the good. So Bruno Groening said, you cannot immediately understand the abundance, the good that has been ordained for every living being. Again, you cannot immediately understand the abundance, the good that has been ordained for every living being. If Bruno Groening is right, then as children of God, what's ordained for us isn't $100 million, it's 100 trillion. Of course, not just earthly dollars, but spiritual wealth and abundance that's beyond our comprehension. If someone walked up to you and said, hey, I have the ability to help you have a life that's so amazing that you literally cannot fathom, literally beyond your capacity to grasp how good your life could be. That would get my attention. And I believe that's what Bruno is saying. That's what's in store. Not so much, but that's what's in store for us. And this is the path to get us there. And that he's here to help us walk that path. Welcome, Alan. Again, Bruno said, you cannot immediately understand the abundance, the good that has been ordained for every living being. I'm currently taking a course right now that's about literally retraining your brain. And one of the premises is that the brain can get caught in a loop of just focusing on what's negative. And I was so struck by that because, when they use scientific words and this part of the brain and neuroplasticity, all these big scientific words. And I just had this feeling of, oh my God, I think this is the essence of what Bruno was trying to say. And the idea in this course is to retrain your brain to function better and focus more on what's positive and what feels good. And I just had this moment of, honestly, it's a little surreal, of asking myself, are they trying to teach me in scientific language what Bruno is trying to teach us from a spiritual point of view? And it's a question I'm sitting with. It may not be it's obviously not exactly the same, but It's so similar. And looking at Bruno's teaching from this new languaging has been very helpful. This idea of, in this course, they call it unconscious habits, where we just do things or think things without really much conscious volition. And that's exactly what Bruno meant when he said the force of habit. But what's most important, what I'm gleaming from this course, and it has me just so in awe of Bruno's teaching, is how powerful it is to just keep focusing on the good. Keep wanting the good, keep seeking the good. And then when we face problems, because we're on the earth, Bruno called it play school. We're gonna have flat tires every now and then. We're gonna, someone's gonna step on our toes, or we're gonna step on their toes. Is to stay in trust, and to trust that it's a learning, not a catastrophe. Not to give it undue attention, not to dissociate, um, but not to give it undue emphasis. And to stay connected to the good even as we're going through it. And it's a muscle I'm working on. I don't claim to be perfect at it. I sometimes wonder if what I experience and I hear others experience when tuning in is a little taste of that goodness that's in store for us. Bruno taught, and he's not the only one who's taught this, that this earth or this human life is a very precious opportunity to fully enter into God. He would use words like that: fully enter to God, to become fully redeemed. But interestingly enough, Bruno Groening said, if you attain a very high spiritual state, but you're in a monastery or you're away from people, That's not the final redemption, salvation. That it's to stay. He said, well, I'll just read it actually. Bruno said, here on the earth, it must turn into deeds what it promised, it being the soul, before his birth. In the spiritual world, the subtle-bodied human being undertakes to put right all the mistakes it once made, but this can only be achieved in the earthly world of cause and effect by means of previously agreed decisions and action. Everything must be done here, where it must either be accomplished through its own will or its failings can be cleared away in love. For this reason, even a spiritually elevated master who has been living in total isolation must be born again in order to accomplish in selfless love and while living in a normal community with flawed people everything he once recognized as divine truth in the hermitage. So let me finish that up. Only a human being who withstands all temptations in daily life and does not allow himself to be brought out of the divine peace by anything, absolutely anything, can release himself from all attachments and is only then truly redeemed. So that could sound a little intense, and let's focus on the good news. It's possible to be at peace under all circumstances. Bruno Groening himself did it. He said, I won't allow anything to pull me out of this divine peace. Because I've sure had that thought, like, oh my God, the only way I'm going to be peaceful is if I can just go live alone. I've had that thought a couple thousand times. I'm sure many people on the spiritual path and many people not on the spiritual path say, I just want to go live in a cabin in the woods. And there's some truth to that. According to Bruno, it's not the full truth. But let's take in what Bruno's offering here, that it's possible to be at peace under all circumstances. And hence we need to watch our thoughts and catch when we start saying yes to negative thoughts, because Bruno pointed out that one negative thought invites another, invites another, invites another. When I was first introduced to this teaching, I couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle the idea of watching my mind throughout the day. It seemed like too much. So I just focused on trust in Bruno, tune in, go to the community hour, don't think about the illness, nothing is impossible. That's where I started on this path. That was all I could take in. And I imagine for many people that's, Bruno taught a lot, but he also asks a lot of us. And he's there to help us every step of the way. And let's make no mistake about it. He said I want you all to become masters of life. Bruno Groening isn't just leading us on a path of becoming better people, which he is, but he's leading us to mastery. Bruno Groening didn't come to start a religion where we worship Bruno Groening. Bruno Groening came to show us the way that we might be, in our own way, more like Bruno Groening. Bruno, I don't know. We'll see what this has to do with anything. I just opened some of my notes. And Freddie Haas once asked Bruno Groening about the song Silent Night, because Bruno Groening spoke very highly of that song. Of course, it's about the birth of Christ, and Freddie asked him, what's the significance of this song? And Bruno said, in essence, it's about the mercy and goodwill of God. So, I speak of it often because I think of it often. This need for us to strive. And as Bruno said in that thing we read earlier, to make right past wrongs. But there's also so much grace available. There's so much help. And I think we all feel that. I know I feel that grace, and I hope others feel it when we tune in, either individually or together, that there's so much help available. And we really need to work. And there's so much help available. It's kind of this, we need to work towards taking in and accepting that help. And to really remember, it's very easy to think that God is punishing us. It's a very common habit that human beings have when things don't go our way. And Bruno Groening was very critical of that. He said, God never punishes. To be mindful that, just as Christ said, Bruno said, we reap what we sow. And that can help us trust life, that life is a process. Sometimes a painful one, sometimes a very painful one. But that it's a trustworthy process. And that brings us to the fundamental question. For me, it's becoming, the fundamental question is, okay, what do I do now? Like, what's my next move, my next thought, my next word? But underneath that, the real fundamental question for me is God good? Is God trustworthy? Is life trustworthy? Is everything, is Bruno Groening right? Does all things serve the good? What's the fundamental nature of life and existence and God? And then, of course, my fundamental nature and each of us as individuals. But what's the, what's the bottom line? Is this a good deal or not? Is this a mostly good deal with some bad paragraphs in it? Or is life, the author of life, God, completely, inherently good and trustworthy, and hence is his creation, life, this process we're all in, is it fundamentally good, fundamentally trustworthy? Not that I have to like every part of it, but do I trust? Can I learn to trust? Is God trustworthy? Am I willing to deepen my trust and faith in the absolute goodness of God? Can I trust that all the pain I've been through, and I've shared on some of these meetings that I've been through the ringer. And of course, the ringer I've been through, many people have been through worse. So the question is, Bruno said, God is order. God is harmony itself. Is that true? And is then life, in all its mess sometimes, also a reflection of that? Is life itself good? The reason why I say it's such a fundamental question because Bruno calls us to trust in God. And so the question is God completely trustworthy? If you look around the world today, you might, and you don't have a spiritual view of the world, you will see plenty of evidence. When I look at the world through just materialistic eyes, I see plenty of evidence to say, no way. If God made this, not good, not trustworthy. If I look at the world from a spiritual point of view, that while I may not like everything that's going on, that all things serve the good. And if I can look at the painful things that happen to me and look at them as a lesson and ask myself, how did I actually benefit from that? How is that? And if I take into account the idea that God gives human beings free will, so all those things are maybe helpful to move us as we ask the fundamental question, is the foundation of life and universe, is my maker good or not? Because the ideas of God that I was raised with, not so good, very vicious, very vindictive, and life didn't really make sense. The God that Bruno Groening, I would say, demonstrated, much less taught about, that God is life and harmony and goodness and love, that God allows us free will, allows us to do, basically Bruno Groening said that God allows free will up to a certain point. And I'll read it, actually, it's very powerful. Human beings have received from God, this is from Powers of the Spirit, page 147. Human beings have received from God as a gift their inviolable, which means unbreakable, free will to stand by either good or evil, even if they make life hell through their lack of understanding, greed, and vengefulness towards one another, and even threaten or annihilate the bodies of other people. This still remains at the level of guilt and retribution in the destiny they make for themselves. There, I'm going to leave a lot out because it's a long section. And Bruno said, so long as life on the earth as a whole is not in danger, then God's forbearance continues. I recommend everyone take a look at this page. Maybe I'll do a whole community hour on it. I love it. Page 147, Power of the Spirit. In essence, God has given us free will. And that within that free will, God allows us to do the most horrific things. As Bruno said, make life hell, destroy the bodies of each other. And that so long as life as a whole is not threatened, Bruno said God's forbearance, forget the exact words, but God's forbearance remains. Meaning, in essence, God lets his children do a lot of horrible things. It's this great mystery called free will. So God isn't going to force his will on us. So long as life on this planet as a whole isn't threatened. It's like he's given us a playground. In fact, Bruno called it a play school to do whatever we want. We take a look around, and so the question is, people look at the mess around here and they say, oh, God caused this. Well, according to Bruno Groening, actually, we caused it. God's allowing it. So what do we do? Well, there's our individual path of growing and freeing ourselves from evil, of making right our past wrongs. And Bruno Groening said, human beings can also serve God by being convinced of the triumph of good in the world. The more people are who want the good, the sooner it can be brought about by God. And so once again, now we finish where we started. It feels good. Thoughts feel good. Thinking about positive things feel good. Rising above problems, staying in faith and trust as problems are presenting themselves, connected to God feels good. And that in wanting the good, which, as Bruno said, when we engage our will, then those thoughts move us to good deeds. But in cultivating this habit of wanting the good, focusing on the good, we're also serving this world. And really, how could it be otherwise? But Bruno just puts it forth so simply. So we'll begin wrapping up now. Takes us also then to this fundamental question. I don't know, I believe Bruno said it, that God is goodness itself. He certainly said God is order. Yes, he would call God das Guten, the good, goodness. If God is goodness, all good and only good, then yes, God is trustworthy. And that can help us rise above the bumpy moments as we cultivate practice of staying focused on what's good, even amidst the challenges. You know, the Bible ends at the very end of the Bible. Basically, heaven is created on earth, and there's a Bible verse that says, "And God Himself shall wipe away all tears, and death shall be no more." I believe that's the good news, that God is fundamentally good, and that goodness is going to show up eventually in all of our lives, in all of our harmony, all of our lives and in our bodies as harmony. And then in every inch of this earth as harmony in a paradise we can't even fathom. There's a Bible verse where it talks about, the lamb and the lion lying down together, and children playing on top of a nest of vipers, because the vipers don't bite anymore. Let's place no limits on God's goodness and the goodness that God has in store for us. And well, when we find those limits, let's offer them over to God and Bruno. I could just do this forever. Let's begin to wrap up. And so I'd like to thank everyone for joining in. Next week at this time will be an introduction. On and off throughout the day, I do spontaneous tuning ins on YouTube. You can get a subscription to my channel, and that'll just let you know when I'm on. Many times at 9:15 in the morning, I do a tuning in there as well. That's not every day, and it's many days. For anyone who's new, if you'd like more information about scheduled events, you can see my website, www.thehealingstream.org. All of this by voluntary donation, meaning I don't expect any. Let's finish how we began. Let's think of something that makes us happy. A scene in nature, a loved one, a beloved animal. Just notice how we feel. Let's consciously decide we want more of that good feeling in our lives. As Bruno said, let's want the good. Now, what if this good feeling that we're feeling is some aspect of God? Because Bruno said it was. He said it's the truth. We're feeling the truth inside of us. And what if one day this good feeling will pervade all across the earth, all throughout every aspect of our lives and all across the earth? That's smile worthy. What if Bruno Groening is right? What if everything will be okay? And that we have a friend in Bruno Groening who will do for us what we cannot do? What if Bruno Groening is right, that he's with us always? We have to tune in and find out if that's true for ourselves. Let's spend a moment and tune in for everyone and everything on this earth, and for the freedom of this earth from all evil, the freedom of Mother Earth, as Bruno called it. He might have been the first to call her Mother Earth. I don't know. The freedom of Mother Earth from all evil. Thank you so much to everyone who joined in, and thank you to everyone who's watching this video. I wish you all a day full of good thoughts, good feelings, harmonious actions, peace and joy. Keep your eye out for miracles. God's pretty big. Our problems are pretty small. Take care. Much love.